Hello. Today I'm in my dungarees and I've been in the park all day reading, so now I'm quite snuffly. I have hay fever, so if I start sneezing, that's why. But I wanted to come in to do the stay at home tag. No one's tagged me, but I'm going to do it anyway. And so I'm going to start. Okay, so I've got some notes because I'll forget what the tags are. Tag, laying in bed tag, book you could read in a day or have read in a day. So I'm going to say The Bell Jar by Sylvia Plath. I have this edition because this is one of my favourite books and she's one of my favourite authors. And the first time I read anything of her, I was like about 16 and I didn't know anything about Sylvia Plath, but I saw another cover of this book that is awful, really. It was the 50th anniversary edition of The Bell Jar that Faber came out with, and when I bought it at the time, I was like, oh, The Bell Jar, that's an interesting title. And I thought it would be an interesting read, and then when I read it, I was completely entranced, and I read it in a whole day, and that made the reading experience... I'm not sure how to say it, really, but I found the reading experience really phenomenal, just because in a whole day you witness her just descent into despair and not really understanding what's going on with her life while she's doing it, and it was really fascinating, and I've not really had a reading experience like that since, where it's completely captured me. The whole story arc has captured me just in a day. I've read books in a day since, but none of them have really hit me the hardest before. And I just think it's a brilliant book. I'll probably do a whole book review on it, actually, because I reread it the other week. So that's that tag. 2, snacking. Guilty pleasure book. Literary biographies are probably a guilty pleasure. They're not really a guilty pleasure because, they can be quite hard going, but... when I've been at uni and I've said, I'm reading this literary biographer to a professor, sometimes they snarl at you and they're like, that's trashy. They make it like it's a trashy, gossipy thing to be reading a literary biography. So I'm going to say this literary biography, which I love, which is Edmund Gordon's Angela Carter, The Invention of Angela Carter. And I love this biography. This is probably one of my favourite literary biographies. I thought he did such a good job with this. And... it's really the only Angela Carter biography out there, I think, but this came out a few years ago, but I love this biography. It was such a good look at her life, and she lived such an interesting life. So yes, I'd say this was a guilty pleasure, I guess. 3, Netflix. Series you want to start. I thought about this, and I don't really read that much fantasy stuff, so I'll just say... the Robin Hobb trilogy, the Farseer trilogy. I'd like to start with that. Jennifer from Insert Literary Pun here. She's read some Robin Hobb and she likes her, so I'm sure if she likes her, I'll like Robin Hobb. So the Robin Hobb Farseer trilogy I would start with. 4, Deep Clean, a book that's been on your TBR for ages, or the longest. This should come as no surprise. Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce. So this is one of the reasons that I wanted to read the James Joyce biography I did in my first video, because when I bought this, it was the summer that I arrived at uni. Well, September. But at the time I arrived at uni when I was 18, giddy-eyed and naive. And there I was in Waterstones, and I was like, I'd recently read Portrait of the Artist as a young man and really liked it. And I was like, Finnegan's Wake... just the title sounded cool to me. So I picked this out in Waterstones, liked the picture of him looking very surly on the back, and, decided I'd pick it. Then when I was at the, the cash desk in Waterstones, the bookseller was like, this is one of the most difficult books to read, don't you? And I went, yeah, and bought it. I was like, are you trying to sell me the book or not? You're a bookseller, mate. But, I mean, he didn't mean it in a nasty way, I'm sure. But I was like, I'm going to buy it just to, I don't know, just to seem cool. Which So I haven't read it since. I read the introduction, which is how long is the introduction? The introduction, is it at least 50 pages? I'm not sure. But the introduction was like 50 pages. So I read the introduction and I was like, fuck this. I'm not going to understand any of it. Maybe if I reread the introduction, it would make more sense. But it's also why I haven't read Ulysses yet. I looked at Ulysses in a modernism seminar, well, a modernism module in second year, and I only read like the first 3 parts and then gave up on it because, you know, it was like full-time uni. I had loads of stuff to read, and I was like, do not have time for this. So that is why I wanted to read the James Joyce biography, because it has some literary analysis in it, and it just kind of breaks down an outlook on the books and how he, how Ellman thought he wrote them, and just the effort he put into the books. Because I'm like, when I was reading the biography, there was one bit where it said, in a certain section in Ulysses, he spent literally 1,000 hours on just one of the sections for it. And I'm like, you know, if he's going to put that much detail, like that much effort into the book, like, I owe it, if I own the book, to, you know, give it a go. And after reading the biography, when he talked about Finnegan's Wake, when Ellman talked about it, he talked about it as Ulysses being set in the day, as Finnegan's Wake is set in the night. So basically that's why Joyce makes the language really, I mean, it's not bizarre, but it's just strange, because, you know, it's meant to be set, I don't know if it's set over a night, but it's like a night language where you're in the dark. He wants you to feel like you're in the dark with the language, and you're kind of feeling your way along, I think. So because now I understand a bit more about the background of it, I feel like I can go into it, and if I don't understand it, I feel like I'll still be trying to understand it, rather than just ending up skimming it or not reading it. But so yeah, at some point after I've read Portrait again and Ulysses, I want to read this. So maybe around September time I'll get onto this, but I'll see. Next tag. Animal Crossing book you purchased because of the hype. Normal People by Sally Rooney. Yeah, pretty self-explanatory again. Like, everyone bangs on about it. And what really nailed it on the head for ordering it for myself was at uni, because I do creative writing, my MA, and sometimes, I mean now, well, when the semester was on, it went all online, but there'd be like sessions with, you know, an editor from Faber who's going to come in and talk about, I wouldn't really even call it advice. They're just telling you what, you know, their job's like, basically. And that editor said, one of the people in this session asked, you know, when you get a manuscript or when you get a brief for a novel that you might publish, what's one thing that, you know, you don't like? And what they said they didn't like is when, you know, an agent or an author tries to sell their book as saying, you know, I'm going to be the next Sally Rooney. So I was like, well, maybe, you know, that must mean Sally Rooney has a really distinct voice. So I was like, I'll check her out. And they've obviously made a Netflix series about Normal People, or some kind of series. So I'm not going to watch that because I don't have a TV for that. I just play PS2 on my TV. So yeah, I had lots of hype, and I don't know that much about it, and I don't really want to know that much about it because I feel like all the stuff out there will probably just ruin it for me. So I'm going to read that in the next week and see what I think of it. Next tag. Productivity. Book you learnt from or had an impact on you. For this, I chose Alan Hollinghurst's The Swimming Pool Library. The first Alan Hollinghurst I read was The Line of Beauty, and I really liked it. And this was his debut, which came out in the 80s, I believe. 88, yeah, end of the 80s. And it's set at the start of the 80s, and this book was so beautiful and amazing to me. It's set over a summer, and, you know, the book describes it as being the last summer of its kind. and it's a gay novel, and it's like an unapologetically gay novel, and a lot of gay people actually roll their eyes at gay writing, like particularly like well-established gay writing. Like this is in the UK, like he is like the British gay author now, basically. And this was his debut, and when it came out, I mean, I wasn't alive then, so I don't know how lauded it was, but it's made out like it was really well received, even though it was a gay novel, so maybe it didn't win loads of prizes. But I mean, Alan Hollinghurst is, he's a pretty hyped gay author in the UK, I guess. But this book is set in the 80s, and it's set just before the outbreak of the AIDS crisis, or AIDS, I don't know what you call it, crisis, I guess. But so it's set just the summer before, so everyone is like having sex, and they're like, we can have sex and not get any diseases. When, I mean, obviously you can get loads of diseases even apart from HIV. So that was one thing in the novel that I was like, I mean, what about syphilis? What about genital warts and all these other horrible things? But no one seems to give a shit about that. They're all just like, we could fucking not get any like really, really bad sexually transmitted diseases, I guess. So, and then the outbreak it never actually comes out into full play. It's just kind of hinted at. So the whole way through the novel, you have this kind of tension on the air as if a storm's going to break out, which, I mean, storm doesn't break out. That would be really over the top. But it twins, you follow this like really posh guy who's like, he's really posh, and his father is like a lord or some kind of really important person in Parliament. So he's the son. So he's grown up. I think he's just finished Oxford, and he's just tottering around London, flitting about, being gay, and cruising and enjoying his life, and thinking, I have no responsibilities. I've got it all because I'm rich, white, privileged. And basically, this whole book is saying, yeah, you're privileged, but you have a responsibility to the rest of everyone because, you're going to inherit what your father leaves you, or whatever. And then he finds out that so this book is twinned with, as a historical novel as well. So it opens with the guy, Will, his name's Will Beckwith, and he is, cruising in, these toilets in a park. And then this old guy that's there cruising, I guess he's cruising as well, who's like a lord. So he's a lord, but he's a gay lord. So he's gay. So they're both gay, but they're not coming on to each other. But Will is kind of like, who's this old guy? Like, who wants to fuck him? And then this old guy basically just has a heart attack in these like toilets, and then Will resuscitates him back to life. So he ends up becoming attached to this older guy, and the older guy is like, I've had a really interesting life. Like when I was growing up, it was like before World War II, I think. So it's set like when British colonialism was still really big. And so he was like in the army, and then he ends up being in somewhere in Africa that I can't remember because it's been a while since I read this. But he ends up being in Africa and like managing some of the colonies. And the book, so Will ends up, the Lord tries to basically say, Will, please be my biographer because, I had a heart attack, could pop my clogs any day now. Will you be my biographer? So Will agrees to read through some of his old journals. So you get like this dual narrative where you're reading his old journals from when he was a young gay, and Will is noticing how much things have changed or not changed, and how much people say things have changed, but really they haven't. And obviously it's set in the 80s, like the contemporary element of the book is in the 80s. So Will is like, oh no, we can be gay now because they passed, the act where you can have sex, where gay people were allowed to have sex and not go to prison for it. So Will is like, yeah, it's all good now. And then he's finding out actually it's really not good because, there was like a really big uprising in racism in the 80s and also homophobia. So Hollinghurst kind of explores that interplay between how like the LGBT community were affected at similar times that the racism arises as well, and that not that they're necessarily connected, but that just fascism in general and, you know, the alt-right seem to just target both of them. And also in the LGBT culture, there's a lot of fetishization about black men, and the book also discusses that. And some people might think that the book is fetishizing that itself, but it's not. I don't think it is, at least. I think it's like presenting it as Will sees it, and then by the end of the novel, everything just becomes like disenchanted. And I find this book actually really depressing by the end of it, because everything just becomes so disenchanted, and he realizes how you know, much as he thinks he's a free young man and can do what he wants, he is actually complicit in history, no matter what way he thinks about it. But the book, I don't think the book on itself is actually a depressing book, as like some gay novels can be. It's just a responsible book, I would call it. So yes, this is a book that had a huge impact on me, and I love Alan Hollinghurst. Well, most of his books I love. Next. Self-care. Something you've done to look after yourself. Oh wait, no, hang on, I've skipped one. Takes time. A book you've been gifted. Right. So yeah, a book I got for Christmas was An Orchestra of Minorities. I read this recently, so I'm probably going to do a video on it in the next few weeks. I really, really liked this book for the most part, but there were some big issues I had with it. But for the most part, this is an author I would check out again. So I guess my reading experience was overall positive. I think I just watched Hannah Tay's video where she like lauded this book, so I thought it was going to be amazing, and I was really excited, and I got why she loves it so much. But for me, I just had concerns about it, or I guess concerns is overstating it a bit, but it just wasn't that amazing for me, unfortunately. Right, and now next, 8, self-care. Something you've done to look after yourself. So recently I've been baking. In my last video, I think I mentioned my cake. I've eaten all of that now by myself because I'm a glutton. And the other thing I've been doing bookishly was reading some of the Harry Potter books. And that actually really helped for some reason. I hadn't read them for maybe a couple of years, so it was just really nice to return to them. I've been watching the old movies on my PS2 because it also plays DVDs, and then I was like, I really want to reread some of the books because the books are just more immersive than the films. Like, I like the films, but there are also parts where some of the plot holes in the films, the books actually explain those plot holes. So I read Half-Blood Prince because that's probably my favourite one. Then I read Deathly Hallows, and then I read Chamber of Secrets, and then I read Prisoner of Azkaban, and that's the one I finished yesterday. And I might reread Goblet of Fire, but I'll see. So yeah, that's a kind of self-care book, just because it was fun to read, so it cheered me up. And finally, 9, the bonus round. Book coming out soon. So I'm going to say, oh my god, what's it called? The Kabul City by John McAuliffe. That is a poetry collection, and I think it was 2014, his last collection, The Way In, which I'm going to read soon. But he's come out with a poetry collection called The Kabul City, but because of coronavirus, they delayed the release of like the actual printed books, I think. So I think online you can get it from Gallery Press. It came out in April, but I don't know if you can get the printed editions yet. But I want to get that at some point. The Kabul City is meant to be so John McAuliffe's poetry centres kind of on home lyrics, which can sound really boring, but it's kind of like he makes the everyday seem fascinating. And his latest book is kind of meant to be, I think, something to do with like the Manchester arena bombings, but not like totally focused on that. I think it's meant to be like set at home, like home lyrics, where the kind of political and historical events kind of impose on the home and that kind of idea. So that's one book. I mean, I don't know if I could recommend it because I've not read it yet, but that is a book, a bonus book that's coming out soon. So yeah, that's my tag. I don't really know who I'm going to tag because no one really watches this channel. And so I'm like, if I tag them, they probably won't know about it. But I'm like, maybe I could just comment on their channel and tell them I tagged them and they can ignore it or not. So I'm going to tag Pickles Reads because I like her stuff. And I'm going to tag Adrian from Stripped Cover Lit because I've not commented on this channel in years. But I wonder what he would do for this tag. So yes, that is my stay-at-home tag. Let me know if any of you feel any way about these books I mentioned. Other people have linked the books below. I probably won't link the books below because that's effort and not enough people watch my channel for me to go through the effort of linking all the books. But I'll tag like Pickles Reads and Stripped Cover Lit in the comments. But if any of you want to ask me more about the books, I can mention them more in the comments. So yes, that's my ideas based on the tags. And the next book I'm probably going to talk about is I'm not sure actually. I'm not sure. So it'll be a surprise. Bye.